Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast Aftersight. I want to give a special thanks to Audio Information Network of Colorado and the entire team for making it possible for this podcast, but also to making it successful. We have thousands of listeners around the world, and I want to thank each and every one of you for continuing to check in with the podcast each week. And today we have a wonderful guest, Chris Monnette, who his book, a memoir and the title is Seeing Clearly. And Chris, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how this journey even started with you?
Yeah, hi. Yes, I'd love to. So the book, Seeing Clearly, it's a memoir of vision loss, emotional blindness, and finding my true self. Right, it's a bit of a mouthful, I guess. So I was diagnosed with macular degeneration. Actually, I found out while I was on my honeymoon, of all things, which is interesting story in of itself. But and then it came home and found out that I was losing my central vision, which was really, as you can imagine, quite a shock. But for me, it really didn't become real for a few years. It was just like, okay, I need a little bit, maybe I need a little different prescription or whatever, but I was still skiing, riding a motorcycle, driving a car. And then, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, things started to change dramatically. And I couldn't make out faces and things like that. And I found myself actually getting, I don't know, I guess I'd say angry is, I think I'm normally a nice guy, but I found myself having a really short temper. And then, my brother found out he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and all this. And I just started saying, I need some help. And I went to a therapist and at the same time, I had been playing around with a blog, about my experience. And those two things kind of came together for me, and it became what I would, it was a wonderful journey of self-discovery, I guess. So.
Yeah. Wow. So you said you were on your honeymoon. Tell us a little bit about that, because it did sound like it was sort of sudden when you realized that, wait, something's different.
Yeah, we got off the plane. We went to Sicily and we got off the plane, and I was driving and my wife was navigating, and I just figured out, jet lag. I was tired. And then we ended up switching, and I said, here, Marilyn, my wife, I said, you drive, I'll navigate. And so I'm looking at the phone and I'm going, wow, I am really tired. I need to get a good night's sleep. And I'll save the journey for those who might read the story, but it was an exciting little journey for us getting to our hotel. But over the next week, my eyes everything just kept slowly getting worse. And, I kept thinking, wow, it's both eyes. I had convinced myself, frankly, that I had a brain tumor. That's what.
Oh, wow.
And I was trying not to tell my wife, I was like, oh, yeah, my eyes, I probably need to get new glasses. But by the end of the 10 days, I was like, no, that she knew there was a serious problem. So it turned out I had neovascular macular degeneration, or wet. And so it progressed very, very quickly. And the good news is I came back and it was treated, and the wet macular degeneration cleared up, but the dry has continued to progress now for almost 10 years. So.
Wow. And you were also, you were an extremely visual person. You were a photographer, and, you worked in corporate America, and you talk about that even on your blog, which people can check out at chrismonnette.com. And a couple of things that really stood out to me on your blog is you were talking about when you lost your vision, you had to learn about vulnerability.
Oh, yeah. I was raised as a young boy. My dad was, grew up in World War II, was a Navy man for his whole career. And then I went to a military high school. I went to Virginia Military Institute, then in the Marine Corps. And the one thing, that was hammered into my head the whole way was, you just need to be strong, buck up and do what needs to be done. And so it was very, very hard for me to ask for help. I shared a story in the book towards the end about a flight I made to probably one of the last business trips I made. Actually, I made to New York City, just trying to find my seat on the airplane. The lights were dimmed, and it was really hard. I remember walking down the aisle, and I'm like, I gotta find the seat. I don't want to pass it, and then I'm going to look like an idiot, and then so I finally turned to the guy behind me, and I was only going to like row 8 or something, and I'm like, hey, can you tell me where row 8 is? And he's like, yeah, it's right in front of you, dude. And I remember sitting there just feeling, just so horrible about that. And so it's been a journey, and I will tell you, all my friends and there's so many people, as I've talked to them more about, they've been just so incredibly helpful, and so supportive. And what I think I've learned along the way is, there's tremendous power in being vulnerable. And frankly, as you lose your vision, what choice do you have, right?
Well, you could just sit on your couch and be grumpy. That is an option. But it is interesting because, I'm visually impaired and have been since age 9, but throughout my life, I've lost, chunks of vision here and there. And that is absolutely the number one thing that I hear over and over, and it applies to myself, is really having to learn that it's okay to ask for help. And that's interesting that people, that is one of the biggest barriers is asking, where's the seat, where's the row, whatever that help may be. And I know, because we actually met through Division of Vocational Rehabilitation counselor. And even with that, sort of hitting that point in your life of saying, hey, I need help with maybe my next career, or I need help with some tools that are going to make me, possible for me to live independently. I think that even in itself, just choosing to reach out to programs like Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, or, even using Colorado Talking Book Library, those kinds of things, people have a real hard time, even though they know, like, oh, my life is probably going to get better, but that initial step of just, like you said, being vulnerable and asking for help is so difficult, especially if you've been raised like with you in a military family, that just wasn't something you were used to doing.
No, I not that long ago, Penn, went to see my doctor. Oh, I guess it's been about a year ago, maybe. I don't even know how long ago it was, but anyways, and I get there and they give me an iPad to fill out this, and and of course I'm not, I don't say anything, and I'm sitting there and I'm trying to get through it and I can't figure it out. And the whole time I can hear my wife in my head saying, baby, just ask for help. People want help. And I'm like, I can't. All right. So I finally walked up, and I think it's probably the first time I've actually said this. I walked up and I said, excuse me, can you help me? I'm visually impaired.
Oh,
and those words didn't come out of my mouth easily, I have to tell you. But she looked at me for a moment, said, of course, and sat there, and we filled out the form. And, there's been so many of those instances along the way that have kind of taught me just to be more vulnerable. And and probably more importantly, in what I find and what's in a lot I try to cover in my book is, it's one thing to say, I need help and be vulnerable. But then there's the other piece of saying, even with my wife, wow, I feel this way. I'm feeling whatever, to really be more in touch with your emotions and be more willing to share those. And, my book is really about, as I go, how my visual impairment has gave me, and I was very deliberate with the title, Seeing Clearly, because it really helped me see more clearly some of the mistakes of my life. I mean, that ended in 2 divorces and, all kinds of challenges that now when I go back and look, I mean, so much of it is tied to just my inability to feel, or as a therapist I was working with referred to my ignorance of the language of emotions.
Yeah, it is so true. I've heard this frequently, is I've even heard people say that their life actually was more enriching after vision loss. And it's one of the reasons we came up with the name of the podcast, that there is life after sight. And a lot of times, in many ways, that life can be bigger and shine brighter than it did before. And part of it is because, like you said, what choice do you have? Well, there are people who make that choice of sitting on the couch and, having others do for them. And that's fine if you're comfortable doing that. But there, like many of us, we want to hang on to our careers. We want to be a bigger part of our community and our families. And so, we do have to, I also want to share, in which I share with people when they talk about how hard it is to ask for help. And you kind of reverse the roles is, I know when I'm someplace and somebody asks me for help, even if it's just a simple thing like in the grocery store, I'm fairly tall and, can you reach that for me? And I'm able to grab it and pull it down for somebody or whatever it is, how good it makes me feel like, I got to help somebody today. And that story I can share with somebody else. And when we ask for help, well, it's that same thing. You're giving somebody the opportunity to help you. I think it goes, that energy goes both ways.
It absolutely does. I remember I was standing in line at REI in Boulder, and this was early on, where I think I might even still been driving at the time. I'm not sure, but certainly I was seeing a change in my eyesight. But a young guy came up to me, just walks up. And there was no outward signs of any visual impairment, but he walks up and says, "Hey, can you help me? I'm trying to figure out which one of these power bars is the right flavor, and I'm visually impaired." And I remember thinking to myself, going, wow, would I have the strength to do that? I was just so, I was so pleased to help him with that and everything. Yeah. But I was just like, wow, I don't know if I have the strength. And, I've learned, I'm not going to say I'm by any means perfect. It's a journey and I'm just a couple steps into it. But, like one of the things I say, at the kind of the way I end the book, frankly, is that, hey, I would have never asked for this. Yeah. But the way this has enriched my life, I feel has it's well worth it, frankly, because I truly have, I feel like I've found myself in the process.
Yeah. I know you talk about in your book about hitting rock bottom, and that was the term you used. What was your rock bottom?
Well, that goes back, and that, believe it or not, that's, or not believe it or not, but anyways, that was really prior to the diagnosis. And it was really more about the emotional journey of my life. My mother passed away a number of years ago. I guess it's been almost 15 years ago. And, I really never came to accepted that. And then my father died, and I was just, I kept all that energy inside. I never went and asked for the help. And the loss of my mom particularly was crippling for me. But I never asked for help. And along the way, it ended up, there were, indiscretions, shall I say, affairs. And I ended a divorce and all that. And I finally got to a point where I just realized, what are you doing with your life, Chris? You are just out of control. And it really came down to me just being so out of touch with my emotions. And it was right about the time when I met my wife, Marilyn. We got married and everything was going great. And then guess what you have?
Just when you thought you figured it out, we're going to throw something else at you.
But I needed a wake up call like that in my life. And, my wife, Marilyn, she's been a godsend for me. You mentioned my photography. I didn't start that till after I was diagnosed with macular degeneration.
Oh,
and,
my God.
And I said to her, I'm like, I remember thinking it's kind of a crazy, she bought me a camera, a really nice camera. And I've always had an interest in it, but I've never had the equipment. And I'm like, seems like a crazy gift to a guy. But it really, when you, and I use this analogy in the book too, when you're going out looking for beautiful pictures to capture, you have to start with a beautiful scene, and you have to, it forces you to look at the world very, very differently.
Yeah.
And I have so many great memories of out with a great friend of mine who's a photographer, trying to capture great photographs. And, the truth of the matter is I've probably got better memories than I do photographs.
Oh, no, I think my husband, as I've shared a few times on the podcast, is a professional photographer, and your photos are stunning. And you're not the first person who's visually impaired that I've talked with that enjoys photography. I think what you said about, yes, the view, the beautiful scenery has to be there before you can capture it on film. But I think almost, I call it just that the world is fuzzy, that we have to pay attention to different things than maybe somebody who has 20/20 vision. And because we are looking for those different things like contrast or, that looks interesting. I'm not sure what it is, but I'm going to click the shutter, that we do come up with different slants on photography because we're literally looking through the lens differently than somebody who has 20/20 vision. But your photos that you share on your website are beautiful and stunning. And I definitely recommend our listeners out there to go to Chris's website and check them out. And Chris, so your book came out. It came out on April Fool's Day, which is a great day. How can they get your book?
Well, today it's initially available in ebook and print on Amazon. I am working diligently to get it available on Audible, and also in conversations with Colorado Talking Book Library. So hopefully the Colorado Talking Book, there's a long lead time on that one, so it'll be a while. But I hope to have it available on Audible in the next few months it takes to make that happen. I mean, frankly, I don't read anymore, so it'd be great to listen to my own book.
Yes, I bet. And how do they get to your book? Like, how can they order it?
So probably the easiest way to get that is you can go to my website, which is chrismonnette.com, two N's, two T's. And from there, there's right on the front page, there's a link to my memoir where you can read about it, and then also take you directly to Amazon, the appropriate page on Amazon. So,
that's great. Yeah.
And
again,
easier than navigating Amazon at some time. So.
I know. And for those who can figure it out, I was not tech savvy enough to do it, but some of you out there are. You can actually, if you use your screen reader, you can read the ebooks out loud. It won't be the human voice, but the voices have come a long way. So you can make it accessible if you prefer to listen to it audibly. But that's so exciting.
To it by Jaws.
There you go. Yes, exactly. So what's next, Chris, for you?
Well, good question. I, at the end of October, a company I was working for was acquired by another company, and I took the opportunity to, my wife refers to it as retirement. I have yet to use that word specifically, but to leave and then figure out where I go from here. I'd love to find a way to use my time to give back somewhere. And I mean, there's so many great organizations. And now that I've got the book done, I've got time. So who knows? We'll see.
Are you going to be do book tour, like a book tour? So you're speaking to audiences?
That's still to be determined. I don't know. I would like to do some locally for sure. I don't know, if it'll be anything more than that, but I'm I'm getting encouraged to do that, shall we say. This book, really, honestly, this book was written more for, if anything, for my kids and for myself. And I really struggle with whether to publish it because it is rather personal in many places, but that's such great feedback since I've shared it. Maybe I need to be more aggressive with that.
And again, you are not the first person who has said that they wrote it for their family and friends, and then it ended up being published. So I think that's a story that's not uncommon. So, and I know you've met some other authors that had similar situations.
Absolutely.
So Chris, what would you want to leave our audience with today? Some words of inspiration, or a skill you've learned along the way that you would like to pass on?
I think that's a great question. I think it's really my story, and the things that really made the biggest difference to me is just really being in touch with my own vulnerability and being in touch with my emotions. I have found that the more I pay attention to what my emotions are telling me, the happier I am, frankly, and the better my relationships, everything from my wife to all my friends. And so if you can pay attention to what your heart's telling you, there's a lot of information there.
And that is a great segue into a quote that you have on your website. And it's absolutely one of my favorite quotes is, "The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." And of course, that is Helen Keller, who is one of my absolute heroes.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
It feels so true.
So great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. And can people reach out to you if they have questions?
Yes, please. And probably the easiest way is right on my website, right on the front page. There's a place where you can contact me there. And that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Okay.
And again, that's chrismonnette.com. And you can find everything from this amazing blog post, which I don't know how often you put up a blog, but they're very inspirational. Some of them are raw and, like you said, vulnerable. Really, you shine through with those. And then we will all be looking for your book, which you can get through that website. So again, thank you for sharing your story, and everybody out there, be kind to yourself today and find a way to be kind to somebody else. So again, thank you, Chris, for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Penn.